I'm Keltie Maguire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Today's episode marks the end of our first season of the podcast. We have just had 14 fantastic episodes, this being the 15th. And I thought rather than just throw you into season 2, which should be coming up at the beginning of May, we would sort of wrap things up by having a little bit of time to reflect and think about the sort of insights and takeaways that we gained from our guests in season 1. Because I don't know about you, listening to these guests share their stories and having these conversations with them was just so insightful. I felt like there were so many moments throughout each conversation where I thought, oh, wow, okay, that's really interesting. Or like, I guess for me specifically, having had all these conversations, I started to notice parallels between them. I thought, oh, this is something that we heard Eleanor talk about, and interesting, Maria had mentioned that. And so I thought today we would tie it all together. We'd do a bit of a season recap where I'm going to share some of those top level takeaways that I think will be specifically helpful for you as you navigate your kids or child-free decision. But before we get into doing that, I just want to say, I am so overwhelmed by the incredible positive response that I have received since launching this podcast in mid-January. I am getting messages from you on Instagram almost every day. I'm getting emails. I'm hearing from clients just how much they're loving these conversations, how much they feel like these are conversations that have been so sorely needed. And so I'm just basically thrilled. I'm so happy you're listening, that you've discovered the podcast. Thank you for leaving reviews. Thank you for sharing your feedback. Thank you for letting me know what kind of guests you want to hear from in season 2. So yeah, this is just the beginning. We have so many more conversations to come. I'm going to be doing more solo episodes as well. So if there's something in particular you want to hear from me and my story, or something I can help support you through, maybe we can do a future episode where you share your particular situation, and I can do a little bit of coaching, if you will, in the form of an episode. So lots of good stuff to come. All right. So I thought for today, what we would do to kick things off is we'd take a look at some of the conversations that we had with moms on the podcast over these last several weeks. And the one message that really came about through so many of these conversations is the fact that as much as you might like to think that if you're going to have a kid, you're going to know in that sense of like, I'm ready, now's the time, let's do this. And over again, what these women are telling me is that you are never going to be 100% ready. Even when you've made the decision, or you're trying to conceive, or you have already had a child, you still have this sense of almost what if we hadn't have taken this path? It's sort of like looking at those other lives that haven't been lived, or this sense of not feeling totally prepared, if you will, to take the journey of being a mother and to have kids, which it's a huge life change. It's totally understandable that there's this sense of having been sort of having a child foisted onto you, and now having to live out this new role as a mom and to care for this little human. So I have a couple of clips here I wanted to share. I thought it was interesting what Leslie shared in episode 3 when she was talking about actually expecting her second child, this feeling of lack of readiness.
Even when I was pregnant with my second kid, there were days when I wasn't ready. I was like, wait a minute, I already have one of these and now I'm having another one. This is crazy. Like, this seems so wild. And then of course, he shows up, and it's, the change from 1 to 2 is a lot. But I'm not sure that there's ever a moment when you're 100% ready, because you don't know what you're getting ready for. You don't know what's coming. You don't know what that kid is going to be like. You don't know what that baby's going to be like. It's one thing to have a baby. It's another to have a child and start to make decisions for that child. So I think that I just, as so many people do, kind of just held my breath and jumped.
And if you've listened to episode 7 with Renee, Renee is very funny. She just totally tells it straight. And I loved when I asked her, sort of, were you ready? And what was this whole experience like? I love what she shared here.
No, I was not ready at all. And I don't think for most things in life, you're ever ready. You will never be ready, especially for parenthood, but launching the business, leaving the relationship, starting the relationship, making the move, asking for the raise, having the conversation, taking the risk. You are never going to feel ready. The end. I just really, truly believe that. I think the best and coolest things in our life are going to come at the cost of doing it with a little bit of self-doubt.
Now, I think these conversations with mothers really help to normalize the ambivalence that we have around this decision. And this is such a big part of the message that I want to share with you, that it is totally normal for us to be questioning this choice. And even for those moms that I've had on where, someone like Leslie, for example, who we just heard from, motherhood is something that she, I think, felt quite an inclination to pursue. There was still some doubts, and she talks about waiting for, or I guess having felt like she didn't have the right partner earlier in life. But even with these women, or someone like Desiree, who talks about her and her husband having waited a long time to have kids, even these moms that had like quite an all-in sense of going forward in this big decision, there's still this sense of ambivalence. And Eleanor talks about this in episode 11, where she shares about her fertility journey, and that through the fertility journey, because she is constantly having to make these decisions as far as the types of treatment, and do I want to pursue it further, and do we want to take that next step, that it really kind of put her in a bit of a tailspin as far as, do I actually want to be doing this? And she talks about in the episode sort of that ambivalence she felt and the flip-flopping back and forth.
I remember driving down the Columbia River and being again like, we don't have to do this. We can just have an amazing life. We can live for ourselves. And it felt so clear, like, yes, wow, we are done. And then we went down to my cousin's, and I don't know what happened to just being with family. I was just like a mess again. And I was like, I'm going to cancel that appointment. And then after that visit, I was like, I'm not canceling the appointment. It was that for like ever. It felt like.
I don't want the implication to be that we should be becoming parents despite having, thought about the implication of the fact that we are going to have a child. This is a big undertaking. I don't want to approach this with the lightness to say you shouldn't really think this through. Of course you are. We know that. But I liked how Renee described the conversation that she had with her husband, David, and how they approached this big pursuit of having a child when she had changed her mind and thought, hey, I think this is something that I really want. And we heard from Renee in episode 7, if you want to go check that one out.
Told David, I was like, I think I want to have a baby. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, I think I do. I think this seems cool. I think we should probably do this. Like, right? Should we? Shouldn't we? Should we? Shouldn't we? And so then I just got off birth control, and we were like, Jesus, take the wheel. Let's see what happens. And within like a couple of months, I was pregnant, and it was definitely a mixed bag because I wasn't like super excited about being a mom, because there's so much that's terrifying. But I also was like, I think I do. I think I don't. I don't know. Let's just see. So that's kind of how I came to be a mom, which is not a very romantic story. But that's just the way it happened.
Now, despite the fact that so many of our mom guests reinforce the fact that, hey, we didn't feel totally ready, in some sense, they still don't feel ready, even though they have children. It is important to still ask ourselves the big questions, and to have, if we're in a partnership, in a relationship, to have important big conversations with our partner about this. And this is something my mom, Jan, shared with me in episode 13. And it was some advice she shared, regardless of what decision you end up ultimately making.
I think to take the time with your partner to possibly meet with a counselor, or go through some questions to discuss all the aspects, and not just one aspect, but as many aspects as possible, and to make as an informed decision as possible.
And in episode 3, Leslie further highlights the conversations that you should be having with your partner before pursuing, trying to conceive, or having a child.
I think the number one thing is getting some clarity on it yourself, and then creating an environment in your relationship that feels safe and it feels good, where you feel confident to say to your partner, hey, I need to talk to you about whether or not you would like to have children. And if you do, how you see that playing out. And you can, there actually there's a whole list of questions in fertility rules to talk about with your partner. I think it's really important that you talk through really kind of nuanced things about finances, about childcare, about how you see work playing out, family support, all of these things. But if you don't talk about it, you'll never know. So that's where I tell people to start.
Now, another message that really came through, and I noticed this as a parallel between so many of these conversations, is that when we make the ultimate decision to have a child, despite feeling maybe not 100% ready, that it is still a leap of faith. And I think this is so important for us to really underpin and emphasize, because there's this notion that we can have 100% confidence and security moving into parenthood should we go down that path. And I have to say that I think if we feel 100% confident, 100% sure, and 100% knowing, that is in a sense a bit of an illusion, because this is a leap of faith. We don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know how we're going to enjoy that process. We don't know, and the experience for that matter of having a child, we don't know what our child's going to be like. And so there's a major loss of control that accompanies this decision. And interestingly, it also came up as something that the guest said has been a really positive force in their life, because a lot of the women shared that they had, prior to becoming a mom, held really tightly to the reins of life, if you will, and that having a child has actually forced them to let go of this.
I think one of the biggest learnings and one of the ways that parenting made me a better person is that I, up until that point, had a very tight hold on my life and this notion that I could control everything.
Yeah.
And parenthood was this very strong evidence to the contrary. It's like, you are on a ride.
Yeah.
It is simply your job to hold on. You cannot control the twists. You cannot control the turns. You have to figure out how to roll with the punches. Obviously, I got like a D for a couple of years, but you made it through.
Pass or fail. There's no grade. Pass or fail.
Yeah. So, I just barely passed by the skin of my teeth then, but it did allow me to realize that I'm actually not steering this ship. We have this false sense that we control our universe, and we don't.
So that was Desiree in episode 1. And Desiree has reinforced to me many times in our friendship that having a child has really helped her to both let go of control, to hopefully, of course, there's anxiety that comes with being a parent, but that also has allowed her to really focus her time and energy very, very consciously, because of the fact that having a child does demand so much time and energy. And that's something we also talked about in that episode where it pertains to her business, is that this, pursuit of becoming a parent has really helped her to have super laser focus about what matters, her priorities, and when she needs to get stuff done. It's like there's no fussing around. It's really getting in to do the thing. Renee echoes something similar in episode 7, and I just want to share with you here what she says about this idea of having to let go of control.
I used to be very like type A, and I'm the opposite of that now. I feel like I've completely done a 180. And I would be like such a planner and obsessive. And I let go of a ton of that. And I just, I think that that's been something that's allowed me to have fun being a mom.
Now, all of these women who became moms, of course, have had to navigate these similar pressures that those of you who are on the fence are also navigating right now. And this is something that came up in the conversations, I think, both in a very conscious way, as far as it was a point of discussion. And it's also something I noticed sort of slipping in as a theme, secondary to some of the other things that we're talking about. So I'll give you an example here. We were speaking with Megan in episode 9, and she talked about the fact that despite being educated and her parents reinforcing that, it's important for her to pursue things and she can do all the things that she wants, that first and foremost, it's also really important to become a mother. And that's a core sort of central role for a woman to pursue.
Growing up, I was encouraged to, I'm educated. I went to school, I have a master's degree. So I was encouraged to pursue my education, but that was also equally important. And it's what I saw in my family, and it's what I saw in society was, get your education, get your career. But as a woman, right, it would be a shame if you didn't become a mom, right? It almost felt unwomanly of me if I didn't become a mom, right? Especially when you're getting into your late 20s and 30s and everyone around you is having kids. I don't know, but that got to me.
And something that was interesting for me in episode 11 with Eleanor is she talked about this unspoken pressure, as she calls it, to become a parent. But it wasn't something we deliberately discussed as far as how that really influenced her decision, but it was sort of an undercurrent throughout her discussion, with her talking about how many people in her surroundings had kids, how she saw that this was the path to follow. And I think whether conscious or unconscious. And of course, she was conscious that there was this influence, but I think it can really impact us in very significant ways and have big bearing on our desire of whether or not we want to have a kid. These things ultimately affect how we feel and what we desire.
When you get married on the other side of 35, I guess when you get married regardless, like it's just hanging in the air. When are you having kids? Especially when you're pushing 40. And, you know, I don't think I had a clear, I wanted to enjoy the time that we had together. And I remember feeling that pressure, but also there's this unspoken pressure beyond your family of just everybody starts having kids.
All right. So another theme that came up through so many of these conversations is something that I'm sure you've heard before. And we talk about having and raising a child takes a village. And something we also discuss in these conversations is the fact that we don't have that sort of community and social fabric and network in the same way that we have historically had in many cultures and families and so forth. And that this makes it very challenging. And the emphasis from, I think, almost every single one of our mom guests is that you need to have support. A support network is just absolutely critical. And we did hear from Megan in episode 9, and Megan is a single mom. She and her husband split up, and she's now solely responsible for and raising her daughter. But she talked about that, yeah, you know, if you want to pursue single motherhood, which of course is an option that's totally available for you women to consider, and there may be some of you who are considering this, you know, going it alone, so to speak. But at the end of the day, you can't actually go it alone. The support network is essential and arguably even more important if you're going to be going into parenthood solo.
There is no way that a woman who think about it, like all the physical duress that she went through to give birth to this baby, and she has to navigate breastfeeding and she has to heal. There is no way a single woman can heal, take care of herself and this little infant all on her own. We are meant to have a community. So that is like the biggest takeaway that I just did not have a good grasp on before I had my baby. I just thought, because I was the independent, driven, optimistic woman, oh yeah, I've already handled all this other crap in my life. What I can handle a baby, no problem. Yeah, I can work from home. Literally, I was like, I'll have my laptop here and be on work calls, and I'll just have my baby in the bassinet next to me. I thought it was that easy. I really didn't think twice about it. So yeah, that is the biggest discrepancy is there are all these things you will lose in motherhood. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but it's the truth. You will lose your time. You will lose your independence. And that's why it's so important to have a village, because you can mitigate those things. If you have a partner, right? If you have grandparents, friends, a community, then they can help you with that. If you need to go to the gym, if you need to go hiking, if you need to go travel, you need that village so that you can reclaim those parts of yourself that you will inevitably lose. And I just feel like we don't talk about this enough. I didn't hear it enough.
Now, of course, we're sort of talking about this decision process and what's this like? How do we navigate that? The pressures involved, the lack of readiness that we may feel, the ambivalence. But at the end of the day, these women have had kids. They've made the decision. And one thing that was really highlighted to me, amongst the challenges and the joys is just how cool these women are finding it to raise a human. Because at the end of the day, you are not just having a baby and having this, cute little nugget of love to love. You may or may not feel the way I do about babies. I share on here how much I love babies, but it's not about having a baby. It's about raising a person, a human, and having responsibility for that human, at least until a certain age. And of course, as I'm sure many of us see with our own parents, I certainly see this with my own mom, there's still the worry, there's still the taking care of, even when you're the ripe old age of 41, like I am today. I know my mom constantly still worries about me. It's something that she's had to work on, of course, as we've all flown the nest. But watching a human grow just brings this incredible inspiration to these women. And I can see it's something that sees them through the challenging times.
It is really amazing to watch a human being grow. I mean, it just never stops being amazing. I mean, that's such an overused word, but it is.
All right. That was Eleanor in episode 11 talking about the experience of watching her daughter change and grow. And Desiree says something virtually the same, just how cool it is to see a child grow up and specifically sort of come into their own. This is Desiree in episode 1.
Having a 13-year-old is incredible. One of the things that I am loving most right now, to watch my oldest go into the world as a very independent person. I am so proud of what he's becoming, and watching him be an independent mini person is so fulfilling to me.
All right, we may be taking a break for a few weeks until season 2, but I've got something for you in the meantime. And that is, I am kicking off not one, but both of my group coaching programs, the Kids Are Child-Free group coaching program and Confidently Child-Free, the 3rd week of April. So if you are either on the fence about kids, you're trying to make this decision, or perhaps you've already decided to stay child-free, but you're wanting to have more confidence in your choice, and you really want to go from feeling shaky to rock solid in your child-free choice, I want to invite you to check out both of these programs. They're going to be kicking off a new 3-month program session, and these programs are going to help you feel so much more confident and clear in whatever path you ultimately choose, all in the company of like-minded women. It's a really incredible growth journey that we're going to be going on together. So I will include the link that will lead you to both programs in the show notes. And I look forward to seeing some of you in either Kids Are Child-Free or Confidently Child-Free when we kick those off towards the end of April. Okay, of course, we can't just talk about what were these themes and these sort of central insights that I gleaned from all of our moms. I want to talk about being child-free as well. And I have to say, despite having already made this choice, I really, personally appreciated these child-free conversations for the fact that they help show me different possibilities for my own life. I really loved hearing from guests like Kate and Maria, who are both women in their 70s. If you haven't heard the episodes with both Kate Kaufman and Maria Coffey, make sure you go listen to those, because those can offer some real insights and inspiration for the later in life of being child-free. But I want to start in terms of looking at this child-free piece and just echoing what I shared a few minutes ago when we talked about ambivalence and entering into motherhood. There's also the ambivalence that precedes deciding to be child-free. So it's not a natural precursor to, if you're ambivalent, that means you're going to become a mom. It means that you could very well stay child-free. And again, this not knowing, this uncertainty, this feeling like, well, it could be good, but maybe not. And this sounds great and that sounds really bad. This is something that can accompany either decision. I also want to say that although there are certainly moms out there and child-free people out there who have this inherent sense of knowing, or it's something they always believe that they would do, that it is a process for a lot of us. And even those guests that I talked to that said, I always hope to become a mom, or I always, kids didn't really seem like something for me. I know we heard from Jennifer in episode 2, and Jennifer talked about the fact that she said, I think the last time that I had actually thought I might have kids was when I wrote in my diary when I was like 12 or 13. And that's the last time I ever really picked up the idea. So despite this innate knowing that some of these women do and did have, we also heard from a lot of women who said that there's still a questioning, there's still a process involved with that. Even if you have this innate knowing, it's something we have to come to terms with. I think especially if we decide the child-free path, because it is something that runs so contrary to or in opposition to what is often expected of us as women and what we see in our culture and society. So Maria shares this beautifully here in episode 8, and just the sort of questioning that came alongside this, and the fact that no, this wasn't something that she always knew. There was a process involved.
It wasn't something that I always knew. It was something that I guess I grew into, that was a gradual process.
Likewise, in episode 10, we hear from Ruby Warrington, who wrote Women Without Kids, another fantastic episode. Definitely check that one out. And Ruby likewise had, not had this longing for children. It sounds like in a way that the child-free path had always been the path for her. However, there was still a lot of questioning that came up at a certain point for her.
Given the societal pressure that exists for women to become mothers, in whatever forms we may encounter that, there was definitely a period of very intense questioning, starting probably early 30s, leading up until early 40s, questioning, why don't I want this? Why am I not feeling called to this? Am I making a mistake? Should I just do it and be done with that, So there was a lot of questioning of my decision not to. So that for me was the period of time where I was kind of in the back and forth around the decision. But ultimately, my intuition, my deepest inner knowing was always that I wasn't going to be a mother.
Now, there's, of course, pleasures that accompany both of these paths, motherhood as well as not having kids. But something that really stood out to me, and something that virtually every child-free woman I had on shared was how much they value and really treasure their time alone. And it seemed to be a theme that these women are ones who enjoy their own company. They're not necessarily, afraid of that. They like doing things on their own. And that's something that they really relish and have a lot of gratitude for having chosen not to have kids. Jennifer shares this in episode 2 when she talks about the ability she has to be able to focus on her creative projects, her writing, and so forth.
Just being able to do something uninterrupted is a joy for me, to be able to immerse myself in a topic, read a bunch of stuff. I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and I don't have to worry about mom in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I love that. I know, sometimes as a mom, that's a wonderful feeling to know someone loves and needs you. But I love that I can, like you said, I can just immerse myself in the writing.
And we heard from Janelle in episode 4. Now, Janelle is still on the fence about the whole kids or child-free decision, but she did talk about the fact that being not just on her own, but being a single woman, so not being in a partnership, that she just loves going about the city and doing all these different activities. And I follow Janelle on Instagram, and she is always out doing something. She's so active, and it's a major inspiration for me because I feel like she's out in the world really enjoying it.
I have no qualms about, say, going to a concert by myself, a movie by myself, going out to eat by myself. Like today, I plan to just kind of spend the whole day on my own, and I don't feel lonely. I don't feel like lacking. I think part of me is like, okay, when am I going to get time to like relax today?
And we hear from Erica in episode 12, who talks about just how much she loves being alone and all the things she does on her own.
I love my alone time. Primarily, first and foremost, I really love my alone time. I take myself out for solo dates. I take myself on solo trips. I do solo beach days. And I enjoy my own company, and I wouldn't get to have that if I was a parent, at least not for a very long time.
Now, of course, one of the things that I hear from a lot of women who are on the fence about kids is this worry that their decision is going to be hurtful or disappointing to other people. And of course, one of the big people, or the group of people, pair of people, I should say, that comes up is that people often worry about disappointing their parents, their mother, their father, and so forth. And the fact is oftentimes this decision may disappoint the people we love. Not necessarily because they're disappointed in us, but because they recognize they're not going to have that experience of watching you become a parent. And in some cases, specifically with those of you who are only children, or maybe who have siblings that don't have kids, this can mean that they will not become grandparents. And that can feel like a huge burden and responsibility, to feel like, if I don't have a kid, this is going to be my fault. I'm taking this away. And this experience of disappointing people is something that came up as a very key theme in a number of these conversations. Here, Jennifer in episode 2 talks about her experience of disappointing her mom for not having kids.
When I came out to my mom, actually, the first thing she said to me was, "No wedding, no babies." Like that wasn't how she ended up being in the long run. She was very supportive of me, very loving toward my partner at the time. But it was also just, it was a statement to me about where the assumptions were, the hopes that my parents had for me, that I would go on to have grandchildren for them. And so it was mostly subtle. It was never actually said outright. It was never an expectation. But when I came out, my mom assumed that because I was gay, I wouldn't have kids, or I wouldn't have And frankly, marriage wasn't legal at the time in the United States. So it wasn't a given that I would get married. So yeah, that's really what that experience was like for me. And having to kind of disappoint my mom was hard.
And of course, in episode 13, we talked to my mom and we asked, what does my mom think of this decision? How does she feel? Is she disappointed? And while she is incredibly supportive and she fully believes and wants me to walk my own path in life, she has said to me on numerous occasions, I don't want to say many times, but we've certainly had the conversation, and it's something that comes up in our podcast conversation, that, yeah, she would love to see me become a mom. She would love to be the grandmother to my kids. I do have a brother and I have a nephew. But I've heard from women that watching, and I think this is something actually that Maria talks about in her episode, watching your child become a parent is something that can feel like a sort of completion or a continuation for a lot of parents. So it's appreciably hard to have these difficult conversations and to feel that we're disappointing the ones we love. But at the end of the day, what's really important is that we don't disappoint ourselves. And Maria talks about the experience that she had before her mom died, when she was dying of terminal cancer. And her mom really, at the end of the day, having the concern that is this what Maria wanted? Has she regretted her decision? And she shares a very beautiful conversation between the two of them.
About a week before she died, one morning I was sitting next to her bed, and out of the blue, she said to me, "Can I ask you something? Have you ever regretted not having children?" And I was really taken aback, because it was a long time since we talked about the subject of children, me having children. Obviously, by then I was 59 years old. Before I answered her, I had this sudden realization that for her, me having a child would have totally completed something. It would have completed the circle of motherhood for her, to see her own daughter have a child. And she would have passed on not only genes, but so much knowledge, and so much understanding. And I suddenly realized that I was actually painfully sorry that I hadn't given her that, but that I knew I just couldn't have given her that, because I wasn't prepared to sacrifice my dreams for her. And I decided not to explain all that to her. I just said, "No, Mama, I've never regretted it. I'm really happy."
Now, while this conversation with Maria is painful, she goes on to share that at the end of the day, having a child just wasn't what she wanted. And even more than that, she recognizes that it wouldn't have allowed her the life that she wanted.
I could have had a child, of course. I'm sure I would have enjoyed motherhood, but it wasn't the life that I wanted. I didn't want to be thinking about, I have to live this place so my kid can go to that school. I think what not having children has given Doug and I as well is a lot of lightness in our lives. We've always known, we're good at knowing what we don't want to do. We've never been good at long-term planning ever, but we're always very clear. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. And that has and we've stayed light on our feet in every way, that when opportunities have arisen to move to another country, to go on some sort of special adventure, let's say to start a venture travel business like we did, that we can go, "Oh, okay, let's switch and do that."
Yeah.
Nothing is holding us down. We're not kind of pinned to one place, and never have been, which I think if you have, or if I'd had children, I probably would have felt quite differently.
Now, something that comes up for a lot of the women I speak with who have either made the child-free decision or are still on the fence is this question of what's going to happen when I'm old. And interestingly, where this came about as sort of the most prevalent conversation piece in my conversations with child-free women are those women who are in older age, specifically with Maria and with Kate. And Maria talks about the fact that her book Instead, which if you haven't heard me rave about Instead, read Maria's memoir. It is beautiful. It is incredible. It is just a wonderful, wonderful story about her life's journey thus far. But, Maria talks about that part of the impetus for her writing the book is the fact that she recognized how important the child-free decision was throughout the course of her life, what an influence it had in terms of the decisions that she made and where she was ultimately able to put her time, attention, and focus. But she also talks about the fact that as she's now in her early 70s, this has really come to the forefront of, okay, what does this decision mean for the rest of my life? Kate also talks about the old age period of time being child-free. Specifically, we talk about end of life and what does it mean to be somebody who is nearing the end of their life and who will support you and take care of you. And Kate talks about a really beautiful friendship she has with her friend Wendy, who is a woman who I believe is about 90, and what that relationship has been like in terms of Kate being asked to support Wendy in the latter years of her life.
It's like not a pay it forward, but it's one of the ways that I demonstrate my love for Wendy is by agreeing to take on these roles. The reason I keep reinforcing that I will be there for her is I don't want her in her last days to be worrying about who's going to be there.
And yet at the same time, as we hear from Kate in episode 14, having those relationships with people is something different. It's a different dynamic than what it is to have your own children. And that's something she really relishes, that role that she provides and offers.
I love watching my sisters with their grandkids flitting around, but I'm happy watching them with their grandkids flit. I don't know what it would have been like. I don't know the deep inner lives that they're leading. I do know that they're all dedicated to their kids. And my bandwidth is wider than that. And I have young people in my life that I'm very, very, very close to. And so I talked about going to the schools. I have had and will have young people in my life always.
And in some cases, these relationships are really close and they can almost have a sort of mother-like maternal quality. And Maria talks about a very special relationship she has with a woman named Agnes, who she met in Africa many years ago and who she supported through school. And now Agnes is a mom herself. And I just find it really beautiful. The story you can read about and instead, but Maria just shares a little glimpse of her story and relationship with Agnes here.
So I tell the whole story in the book, but long story short, some months later, she started at Nairobi University and we met her in 2011. She is now a barrister and she has 2 children of her own. And maybe I won't give away.
Yeah.
Well, okay. She calls me Mala. Yeah. And we're close.
Of course, another big question that we ask when we're considering the child-free path is, will I be fulfilled if I don't have kids? And this is a narrative that is so prevalent that if you don't have kids, your life isn't fully going to be meaningful. There's not really purpose. You're ultimately going to be unfulfilled. You're not going to be happy. You've heard it all before, of course. And yet what I'm hearing from these women is they have lived exactly the lives that they've wanted. They are active. They are fulfilled. They are traveling. They're doing all these cool things. And Maria talks about it in episode 8.
I have fulfilled my dreams that I had as a child and exceeded them massively. I mean, I definitely feel I have and still having a fulfilled life, because it's also been a life of great connection, because obviously that's something that family gives you. And maybe, in my case, I think because I didn't have children, it's, I've gone out into the world and I've got this, and made these incredible connections with people around the world. And for all our adventuring, for me, the most important part of it has been the people that we've met and the people that we've really connected with and often stayed close friends with.
I love that whether or not we have kids, connection is such a central, important thing for us. And this is something I've noticed with a lot of my clients. And it's something that actually just came up in a conversation with the clients inside my Confidently Child-Free program, is that in order to feel like they've had or will have a really meaningful, purposeful life, all of these women are saying that they need to have connection still, connection with their partner, connection with friends. Making these family-like relationships and connections is something that's so important for many women, even if they don't have kids. And I'm going to argue not just for women, but this is an internal sort of intrinsic, I should say, human need to connect. And we hear from Erica in episode 12, who just lays it to us straight that, hey, no need to worry about her. She feels good in her life.
I don't have a void in my life. I don't feel any void. And I feel fortunate for that, but I spend a lot of time walking them. I'm very active. I get to do things that are active, lots of walking, hiking, picking up when I want and going places. Often I bring the dogs with me. I have family. My parents live about 4 hours away from me, so I spend a lot of time going back and seeing my mom and dad. These are all the things that make me super happy. And then, of course, my work. I've been working for myself for about 4.5 years now, and it's so great. Just having the freedom. So all of those things make me super fulfilled and super happy. And that's how I like to spend my time.
Now, despite the joy and fulfillment that these child-free women share with me, they also highlight that grief and sadness is normal, and it's actually totally fine. And again, this is a very normal thing to feel certain sadness or wistfulness about the things you're missing out on by not becoming a mom. But it also means that they don't regret their choice. Again, none of these women say that they regret their choice, but there is sometimes still a wistfulness there. Maria says it so beautifully here in episode 8.
not having had the experience of, holding a newborn baby for the first time. Those things, those are big experiences that I haven't had. And I'm not saying that I wish I'd had them, but yeah, sometimes there are real pangs.
And likewise, Jennifer, who we heard from in episode 2, talks about that despite really never having wanted to pursue motherhood, there is a period in her life where she experiences some grief around not having become a mom.
And it wasn't until probably my 40s where I started to realize that menopause was coming eventually. It hadn't hit yet, but I had been thinking about the fact that the time, some people talk about their biological clock ticking, and they're aware that there's only going to be so many more years that they could have a baby. And for me, there was a little bit of regret about I won't ever get to experience giving birth. Like, that was the only thing that I ever felt any regret about. Not that I wanted to raise a child, but that my body was going to have a limited number of years that I could experience that if I wanted to. So there was a little bit of grief, I think, around that. It lasted maybe 6 months, but it was never strong enough to do anything about or offer to be a surrogate parent or anything like that.
Now, as I just shared, there was no indication of regret from any of the women that I've spoken with thus far at any point in life. Of course, we've spoken with women in their 30s, 40s, all the way up to their 70s. And this is further highlighted or reinforced in my conversation with Ruby Warrington, who said that she herself, through the research she did for her book and all of the conversations with older women, have seen, older child-free women specifically, has not seen any indication that women who consciously choose this child-free path come to regret it.
I was just so relieved that all of the elder women without kids that I have spoken to, while there was certainly some feelings of sadness, some feelings of, I haven't had that experience, there was no regret. I never heard I have yet to hear any woman kind of age 70 plus express regret for not having had children or for staying true to herself. And if anything, actually, what I did discover was that the number one deathbed regret is I regret not living my life true to myself and living the life that other people wanted for me. And so those two factors combined made me quite hopeful, I suppose, that yes, whilst I think every human being will probably, as they age, grapple with feelings of things they might have missed out on or things they could have done differently, the idea that it would be that I'm going to regret pursuing what feels like my truth, that's sort of wiped away for me now.
Now, one of the last things I want to highlight and share and specifically reinforce as we kind of like tie things together here between the moms and the non-moms, the child-free and the mothers, is that there just seemed to be such respect and admiration from both sides when I talk about and ask the question of, what do you want to say or share with moms or child-free women, depending which side of the equation we're kind of exploring? We hear from Leslie here in episode 3.
I have lots of child-free friends, and we've talked about it a lot. I totally respect their decisions. I love them for their decisions, and I don't judge them at all. I think people have to make the right decisions for them. But, just talking and being honest, and I don't know, I love my child-free friends and I so respect it.
And likewise, to illustrate the sort of positive message I see coming from child-free women, we hear from Jennifer.
Wow. You're awesome. You're doing amazing, generous, selfless work every day.
Now, I just love this because I think sometimes there can feel like there's sort of this barrier between moms and non-moms, that we can feel like, this lack of understanding or that there's some sort of competition. And of course, that's not the case. And speaking with these women who've navigated this choice, there is only respect for one another's decisions, which, if the guests I've had on the podcast could be sort of representative of society, broadly speaking, like what a beautiful world it would be to see women support and uplift one another in their decision, regardless of what that decision may be. All right. Thank you for tuning in for this season 1 recap. I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a message on Instagram. I'm over at Kids or Child Free. I also have that linked in the show notes. Did you like this? Was it helpful to sort of have a synopsis of some of the key points we heard from our guests over the last many conversations in season 1? Is this something I should do again? Or is it like you just want to get the new guests going? I'd be curious to hear what you thought of this. Felt like a bit of an experiment, and I'm all about experimentation. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to make an invitation. Please leave a review for the podcast. As mentioned, we're going to be taking a break for a few weeks until early May. And if you have listened to the podcast and not either left a rating on Spotify or a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, please go do it now, because it helps so much in getting us discovered by more women who are on the fence about this decision so they can discover the Kids Are Child-Free podcast. That's all for me today. I look forward to seeing you back here soon for many more fantastic conversations. I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Okay, now that we've wrapped up today's conversation, this is the part of the episode where I tell you that you need to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. And you really need to do that. And I'm going to tell you why. And that is because one of the big ways that people find and discover new podcasts like this one is through reviews. So if you yourself can go say what you loved about this podcast, why people who are on the fence should tune into the Kids Are Child-Free podcast, that's going to help other people who are also wondering, should I have kids or stay child-free, to discover us. Thank you in advance for doing so. I will be featuring some of the reviews in upcoming episodes, so maybe I'll share yours. You never know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you back here soon for our next episode.